The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr. Speaker, what a joy to follow that member who's just resumed her seat. Nothing, I mean, everything from now on has to be better, doesn't it, really? I mean, for goodness sake, let me take up the cudgels on behalf of Radio New Zealand from that horrible attack from New Zealand First. Right. Radio New Zealand should be able to put on commentary from politicians who they want to hear from, not ones they're made to hear from. Good on Radio New Zealand. I remember, and I'd like to take up a point that Chris Farfoy said. He said we had no commitment to Radio New Zealand. Well, actually, I remember 1YA. Of course, I was a child at the time. And we had this fabulous program on Sunday mornings called Flick the Little Fire Engine. That was Radio New Zealand. And when I was growing up, and I think it's still on, actually, on some parts, it's the same program over and over again, which is pretty fantastic. It's called recycling. But really, we have $35 million worth of taxpayer money of commitment, $35 million every year going to Radio New Zealand. And if I tell you, Mr. Speaker, how much money, taxpayer money, goes to News Talk ZB? Zero. How much goes to Radio Live? Zero. How much goes to Radio Hauraki? Zero. How much goes to Classic Hits? Zero. How much goes to my favourite station, personally, The Breeze, because they play good music when I'm driving? Zero. That's it, zero. And yet we have $35 million a year of taxpayer money going to Radio New Zealand. Now, I think that's money well spent myself. I just love being interviewed by Mary Wilson on Checkpoint. Nothing it gets better than that. Nothing like that, with this sort of rabid viewer coming through down the line, ripping your heart out. Fantastic stuff. Then there's the morning report, unfairly, I think, referred to occasionally as moaning report. Very unfair, because I actually really enjoy listening to Susie Ferguson and Guy Espanier. And I challenged New Zealand First, Tracy Martin, the Deputy Leader, to come up for one reason why they would want to interview New Zealand First. Radio New Zealand has a very balanced view. They're not always fond of government, except when, well, especially when it's us. But having said that, I still think they have a really good place to be. They are, in fact, the people who don't have to pay for or get advertising to pay for their wages, not like every other radio station with whom they compete. They have an obligation to produce something which we expect, which is sound, balanced radio. Occasionally they get it wrong. I was listening to the panel one day just last week, and that lovely Jim Mora, who I'm very fond of, had on that lady, you know what, she's the one who does those baking soda cleansers. She was commenting, I have no idea why, and somebody else who was similarly left-wing, and they were commenting in a really balanced way, all left. And I thought, well, isn't that great? And I thought, actually, the public can listen to this and they'll make up their own minds. But you know what, Radio New Zealand, apart from all that, now we all have our little sort of things about them, I actually think generally they do a really good job. So, Chris Farfoy saying we're not interested in public broadcasting. Well, yes, we are. He also wondered why TVNZ doesn't want to run all these TV ads or political ads at elections. I tell you why. Mostly they're really boring. You know, mostly they really are. And because these days, unlike when I and the Speaker were growing up, well, he was growing up a lot earlier than me, I have to say. When we were growing up, there wasn't any choice. People were basically chained to the TV, the one station, in one stage the two stations, waiting for the little Kiwi to come out at about 9:30 to tell us to go to bed. You know, that's what it was like. And I know Dr. Megan Woods is looking at this and saying, is this true? It was. And worse than that, it was in black and white. And that's actually what we used to have with our public broadcasting dollar. But let's just wonder this. Why do we have public broadcasting? Well, actually, we had it to start with because there was no commercial interest or ability to actually bring it about. But I think it has actually won a place in people's hearts. You know, where else is one going to learn about bird calls other than Radio New Zealand? And that's a good thing. Where else, should you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning for some strange reason and need to go to sleep, what else are you going to do? Turn on Radio New Zealand at 5 o'clock in the morning, you'll go back to sleep. It's fantastic. But I am digressing. The fact is, Radio New Zealand has $35 million of taxpayer money every single year. That is $35 million more than every other radio station that it competes with. I actually think that's quite a good deal, frankly. If I was Radio New Zealand, I'd be pretty pleased with that. And I'd also like to say is that I actually think that Radio New Zealand has really improved its performance around communicating with and making itself accessible to the public. Because as we've heard tonight from all the speakers tonight, everyone's saying they have things like Netflix and stuff like that. Well, actually, I don't. I generally try to watch some television, normally not the news, because it's always a bit dull and depressing. But I actually like seeing ordinary TV occasionally. But you know what? We have so much more choice nowadays. So many of the Radio New Zealand programs that are really good, if you can't listen to it, then you can actually listen to it on the internet later on. And they have a very good service on the internet so that it's very quickly available. So if you want to go and check your interview, what's happened or what's going on in something or whatever the bird call was today, it's actually available. And I think that's important. And that's no different, by the way, than most of the other the commercial stations with whom they compete. But I will say Radio New Zealand has certain obligations. For instance, they come to our Commerce Select Committee and they report to us every year on their financial review, and they come to us to talk about what they've actually done with the $35 million that they get every year, more than every other radio station and broadcaster. And they tell us what they're doing. And why I was really pleased this year to be able to say to the Radio New Zealand board, when they turned up the chief executive, actually I think they're doing a great job. I know it's a lot of money. It's actually a huge amount of money. But having said that, it is something that a lot of people listen to. I am one of those people who listen to it during the day, if I have a chance to. But then again, I also listen to ZB.
I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair. Members, this debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day. And the House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow. Good evening.
Good evening.